So now I'd like to introduce our next speaker. Our tonight's speaker is Nathan Brown, and he studied biology and kinesiology at the University of Utah. He's volunteered as a state and county delegate and Senate chair, volunteered for years with Pro-Life Utah, and he's a member of the Salt Lake County Honorary Colonels, but above all, have a great privilege of being married to a wonderful woman and having the joy of raising his 5 children. He's a successful business owner and understands the stress of making What's that? 6 children. Oh, this is updated. Thank you. He's a successful business owner, and he understands the stress of making payroll every 2 weeks and the results-driven and act towards solutions and not excuses. And the last legislative session, we noticed that he was doing videos every single day. He was at the state capitol every single day, watching and looking at what's going on, reading just 100-page documents and what the state legislature was doing, what they were spending money on. And in the video version of this that will be posted in 2 weeks on our YouTube channel, we're going to put links to his channel and the trainings that he has to help you better navigate the legislative website and the things that you can watch the reports that he did last year as well. And we just found him to be a great expert on this topic and wanted to bring him here today to be able to help you understand better about what's going on and what you can do about it. So help me welcome Nathan Brown.
Well, thank you so much, everybody, for being here tonight. My hope is that this evening, as we review what a lot of people consider to be somewhat boring, which is numbers and accounting, we're going to do everything within our power to make this thing anything but boring. So with that being the case, I wanted to start out this evening, all right. So as I was coming here this evening, the interesting thing is I was preparing to give a presentation tonight on COVID, but unfortunately, based on the most recent polling, COVID is no longer the number one concern. We have a technical issue. Back to it. Inflation has actually surged to the number one concern on Americans' mind. And in fact, COVID-19 is no longer the number one concern. So we know that grocery prices are up 6.3% from where they were just a year ago. Does this work? Oh, yes, it does. Car prices are up 37.3%. I think most of us have seen that. Home prices as well. A 30% year-over-year rise in the median price of homes sold across the state. That's an increase of $105,000. Now, like was just mentioned earlier, as the father of 6 children, that is a huge concern for me. How in the world, and I remember how difficult it was for me to buy a home, how difficult will it be for my children, will it be for our grandchildren to enjoy the benefit of home owning in our world. The median price of a home in Utah is now $450,000. Again, median cost. So again, we know COVID is no longer a top 5 concern. The speed of which inflation is growing, a lot of analysts are saying it's actually growing faster than COVID expanded. And so tonight we're going to take a look at not only how this happened, but most importantly, and the thing that I love about this evening's presentation is we want to know what can we do about it. So the first thing that we need to do tonight is we need to begin by investigating the problem. What is the problem that's driving inflation? What is the problem that is driving all of this, right? If we listen to the average individual, they'll just say, oh, it's a supply and demand issue. People just really love homes in Utah. We have people coming from out of state. And as a result of that, you just have to deal with it. It's supply and demand. Or is it something else? So with that being the case, we'll also be looking at what are those solutions, okay? And again, the survey indicated that over 85% of Utahns are concerned about inflation. So here we are, a great little caricature that shows Uncle Sam with the national debt on his back and a politician, take your pick, coming over and saying, a little more spending, you can handle a little bit more. So before we get into tonight's presentation, the one thing we want to really make sure that we cover are principles. And hopefully all of you have had an opportunity to read this amazing discourse given by Ezra Taft Benson. And in it, he covered 15 different principles about the proper role of government. And for this evening, we really want to try to focus on 2 of these principles that are the most important, okay? So the first one is that the sole function of government is to protect life, liberty, and property. And anything more than this is usurpation and oppression. Direct quote. Second, no citizen or group of citizens has any right to direct their agent, the government, to perform any act which would be evil or offensive to the conscience if that citizen were performing the act himself outside the framework of government. So what does that mean? Well, it means if it's immoral for the individual, then the government cannot do it. One other quote in this talk, if you'll allow me, that Benson reviewed, as he says, the important thing to keep in mind is that the people who have created their government can give that government only such powers as they themselves have in the first place. Obviously, they cannot give that which they do not possess. So the question boils down to this: what powers properly belong to each and every person in the absence of and prior to the establishment of any organized governmental form? A hypothetical question? Yes, indeed, says Benson. But it is a question which is vital to an understanding of the principles which underlie the proper function of government. I really want to focus on this slide because from the rest of the presentation, unfortunately, is going to deviate very heavy from this. Because what we're going to find, ladies and gentlemen, is that if we had this at the heart of our government, 99.99999% of what I would have liked to have presented on tonight would disappear. It quite simply would go away. So, another very famous founder of our great nation, Thomas Jefferson, had this to say, that there is no safe dispository of the ultimate powers of the society, but the people themselves. And if we think them not enlightened enough to exercise their control with a wholesome discretion, the remedy is not to take it from them, but to inform their discretion by education. So again, what does this one mean? That the ultimate powers rest with we the people. Okay? A couple important quotes to look at this evening is, since the only proper function of a government is to protect man's rights, it cannot claim title to his life in exchange for that protection. Now think about the world that we live in 2 years ago, and think about the world that we live in today, and how your life is literally being asked for under the guise of government protection. Men have been found to resist the most powerful, but few indeed have been found to resist the crowd, and with folded arms to dare a no when a yes is demanded. Again, very simple things like the Defending Utah group has done to go shopping and to go to parks and to enjoy a dinner at a restaurant. Things that 3-4 years ago wouldn't be considered insane, but here we are. What is it that the crowd is demanding that we do? One of my favorite Ron Paul quotes is, instead of debating spending levels, we ought to be debating whether the agencies, the programs funded by the budget should exist at all. Another way to look at it, if you're not much of a reader, just glance at that for a moment. Pretty self-explanatory. We are on fire and the government's asleep at the wheel. Couple more. The powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined, and there are people who think that plunder, loses all its immorality as soon as it becomes legal. Remember this quote, and remember that word legal. A lot of what we're going to be discussing tonight very well may be legal, according to the definition of legal, which is why I did not start tonight's presentation with this. We started with something much, much more profound, which are what? Principles. All right? So moving forward, we need to look at briefly what is the basics of the economic foundation of any freedom government, any freedom society. So the first is going to be the first principle, pardon me, is private ownership. Okay? In this, the government will allow property to be used as each owner deems best, encouraging widespread ownership among citizens. Is that happening today? Again, as we looked at what is going on with inflation, you can tell we're not being encouraged to own anything. Why? Just too expensive to own anymore. Okay? Benson on this topic said one thing further. He said, I hereby resolve that under no circumstance shall the freedoms guaranteed by the Bill of Rights be infringed. In particular, I am opposed to any attempt on the part of the federal government to deny the people their right to bear arms, to worship and pray when and where they choose, or to own and control private property. Okay, so that's the proper basis of an economic foundation, something that I think all of us in this room could agree to, but every one of these principles at its root is under assault today. So the second principle is market freedom. And under market freedom, we need to be able to sell anything to anyone at any time or place at any mutually agreeable price. Now, some would agree that there should be limited exceptions to that, and that you can't be free to sell literally anything. But again, if this nation is set up and to be controlled by moral people, then that's exactly what moral people will do. Now, with the advent of criminals and immorality, yes, this may take on a different opportunity, but it must remain a free principle and basic to our foundation. The third then is, and we'll talk a lot about tonight, is reliable money, where the value is reasonably constant and certain. Again, can't get enough Benson, so here we go again. Benson said this, I believe in honest money, the gold and silver coinage of the Constitution, and a circulation medium convertible into such money without loss. I regard it as a flagrant violation of the explicit provisions of the Constitution for the federal government to make it a criminal offense to use gold or silver as coin as legal tender, or to use irredeemable paper money. So this reliable money has to be stable. It has to be reliable. And why is that? Well, the simplest reason for that is if there's no stable measure, then the prices or service can fluctuate, and they fluctuate rapidly, ladies and gentlemen. And again, go back to how we started this presentation. 85% of Americans, the number one thing they're concerned about is inflation. Your dollar is simply not a dollar anymore. What you used to be able to purchase with that dollar is not the same. So this rapid fluctuation means that debts and investment can be literally eliminated through inflation, and property can be taken by manipulating the supply of money. So if we look at this and we go back historically, has this ever happened in the history of the world? The answer is absolutely yes, right? As the American experiment unfolded, it almost failed because of a lack of money. And what happened immediately as that money problem started to surface? Well, we tried a new experiment, one that involved the printing of bills of credit. These guys called Continentals. And these Continentals that were printed for about 4 years with a value of over $240 million came out to really buoy up that struggling wartime new founded nation. But by 1780, these bills had lost almost all of their face value. James Madison justified the printing of those Continentals, and he justified it simply for national survival. And here's the quote that he used: "Being engaged in a necessary war without specie," again, gold or silver, "to defray the expense or to support paper emissions for that purpose, redeemable on demand, and being at the same time unable to borrow, no recourse was left but to emit bills of credit to be redeemed in the future." Now remember, this is Madison who said that, because we're going to look at Madison after the fact. And what did he learn? So the war was financed from American and European lenders, and that happened as this borrowing occurred. What happened was that they got loan certificates, and those loans amongst the colonies, amongst the individuals, those were eventually paid off. However, these worthless bills of credit were never to be redeemed. Okay, so it's this manipulation of money by both state and national governments during the 1780s that really drove the demand, the American demand, to not do that ever again, to end the issuing of all paper money. And how were we going to do that? Well, we were going to return to the gold and silver standard. And we etched it in Article 1 of the U.S. Constitution and made absolutely certain that no more printing of money was to be allowed. So, emitting these bills of credit was something that was not on the list of powers that was given to Congress. Again, go back to what we looked at as a founding principle for tonight. Do we recall what Benson taught us? He said, if I can't do it, if I myself cannot do that, then I myself cannot delegate that authority to someone to do it on my behalf. Quite frankly, I cannot give it to the government, therefore the government can't do it. Would it be okay for me just to go into my basement, print off $1 million, go to the bank and say, hey, I got $1 million, it's from my basement, it's cool, right? Absolutely not. Right? So that fiat or paper money started out, and then it made its return in the 1930s, which was precisely what the framers of the Constitution were trying to prevent. Now here we have James Madison in Federalist 44. Again, the same founding father that was in support initially. Right? It was for the good of the country. We needed to make sure that we had paper money available to pay off our debts, to wage a war. And then what happened? The extension of the prohibition bills of credit must give pleasure to every citizen. Right? So the idea should make everybody in the nation happy that we can no longer do that. And he actually then refers to it as the pestilence effects of paper money. And again, remember, this is back at a time when most of America was making its income and its living as farmers. The use of the word pestilence really meant something then. And I hope it means something to us today, that pestilence of paper money is what has returned. And again, one of the reasons why 85% of Americans are absolutely floored more than COVID has ever hurt them before. So the idea then is, how are we doing in Utah, right? We're here to discuss Utah. Well, I would start by asking the question, who is managing our money? Think about that just for a moment. Think about your own circumstances. Who manages your money? Hopefully you do. If you are in a relationship with someone, hopefully there are terms on who's managing your money. So who's managing our money? Well, let's look at it. Is it Governor Cox? Well, you know, he's got the Governor's Office of Planning and Budget. He also has the Office of Legislative Fiscal Analyst. There's 18 people on his budget staff. There's 8 people on the executive team. There are 5 leaders and 19 analysts. Who? Maybe it's the House of Representatives, right? We vote for these people. Maybe it's not all of them. Maybe it's just Speaker Brad Wilson. Could it be that it's the Senate that's managing our money? Or maybe it's President Adams. Maybe it's this interesting thing that I've heard of, this nuance called an appropriation subcommittee, that all the legislators serve on, that has 8 people running it. And then they run through initiatives. It's detailed. Man, I've even heard of this thing called the Budget of the State of Utah. Have any of you read that? It's a fascinating read. I'll show you how you can get one tonight. It's an amazing read. Blow your mind. By the way, that one's published after it's done, so it's a little too late once you're reading it. So who's managing our money? Interesting answer. All of them. And many, many more. And we're going to look at most of them tonight. So stay tuned. So the ultimate spending is then decided upon by the appropriation subcommittee. You're all in for a treat. Okay? This next week, it's like the Super Bowl is going to start for all of us. Because next week, the legislature is back in session. Can you wait? The anticipation? So I was up there, as was mentioned earlier, every day with popcorn and notebooks and listening, taking arduous notes, recording YouTube videos that sometimes 5 people would watch. It was amazing times. Okay? Well, this next week, and for the first 3 weeks of the legislative session, these appropriation subcommittees, there's 8 of them. So you can't go to every meeting at one time, but if you have 7 friends, by golly, you're in for a fun one, because you can exchange notes, and I saw this. It's amazing stuff. The Super Bowl, or better. But then you want to make sure that you really follow the 2 chairs, and we're going to be discussing them in great detail this evening. Who are they? Why should you care? How about that number? Did you know that this year our budget jumped from 21 billion with a B to 25 billion? Anybody still not care? I hope you do. Right? We've said it very many times that oftentimes evil disguises itself as boring, but it's not. It's still very evil, and this is how they finance their endeavors. So the first thing we want to look at is, why do people not listen to this information? Why is this information new for some people? Why is it that we're too busy to really care? Well, again, the first step of repentance is to recognize sin. So let's look at 3. The first one that I hear very often, maybe most of you do, is, but Utah is one of the best run states. Well, consider your competition. Okay, so if you look at the rest of the United States of America, the worst state out there is Massachusetts with an $11.1 thousand debt per capita. The best is Tennessee, $800, and Utah, $2.2 thousand per person. All is not well. The second thing, and this one drives me crazy, but Utah has a AAA bond rating. Nobody has one of those, Nathan. Forget about it. Well, so do 14 others, ladies and gentlemen, and 27 more have a AA bond rating, which by all indications, it's the same. So we're not special. The last one that I love the most, Utah's operating on a balanced budget and runs very little debt. Well, I would say, let's take a look at that one. And since you all have a couple hours, you get to listen to it. Here we go. So first we want to try to understand the debt of Utah. And it's not as simple as you might think. Let me show you what I mean by that. If we look at a report that lists off the states with the least debt, you'll notice right here, and this is from Forbes, okay? Forbes magazine says that the state of Utah is $6.883 billion in debt. However, if we look at the state of Utah Truth in Accounting on page 33 of 132, you'll find that the total bill is $8.1 billion. A little bit of a discrepancy. If we look at the U.S. debt clock, it will indicate that the state of Utah's debt is at $22 billion. Now, we talked a lot about the word billion. How big is a billion? How many of you have seen that stack right there, the smallest one? $10,000. We'd all love to see that, but look how small it is. Then you notice how big is $1 million. Person wouldn't even trip on it walking to the park with their mask. fully covering their nose and mouth. Then you can see $100 million is a pallet. 1 billion would be obviously 10 pallets, but that is at $100 bills. What's another way to look at it? Pardon me. At a rate of 1 number per second, it would take approximately 31 years, 51 days, 7 hours, 46 minutes, and 40 seconds if you're counting one at a time. Meaning Utah's debt is so big it would take you roughly 300 years to count. 300 years to count. Well, there's got to be a constitutional limit on how much debt we can carry, right? We've all heard about it. So the Forbes report says 7.4 billion. The Deseret News says 8.1 billion. And the state auditor comes in at a measly 2.749 billion. How in the world does that happen? So the difference is either 4.7 or 5.4 billion dollars. How? It's an accounting game. It's very just how you account for it. And a lot of it is based on the type of bond that's being used. Do you guys know that that's how we get this debt in Utah? Utah does not have a reserve where we print money. We all know that, right? So how do we get it? We get it through bonds. So the first source of bonding is called a GO bond, a general obligation. And it's going to pledge the faith of all of us in this room, all of us watching on YouTube this evening, or Zoom, pardon me. And it's literally pledging you and I as collateral for the debt. Ooh, feels good. The second is a revenue bond, which in theory are paid off by a specific tax or fee. So an example of that would be, a few years ago, the University of Utah went out and they got a revenue bond, and they were going to build a new student health gym facility for it. And the way that they were going to pay for that was through student athletic fees. Okay, that's a revenue bond. Well, the 2.8 billion does not include any state-issued revenue bonds. And the answer to that is quite simple. They don't include that because, number one, no judge has told them that they need to. Comedy, I think. So how big is the debt? Well, we have 4.1 billion in GO bonds. We have 4 billion in component units, 2.65 billion in liabilities. We're going to look at the UTA in a bit, and the 1.38 billion in business activities. So there we are. The debt is crushing us. And again, the debt is 8.13 billion. Now, they can account for it in very fun and energetic manners, but that is a real number. So we mentioned this thing called the UTA. Does everybody ride the UTA regularly? You're on front runner, you're doing all of that? Well, you should. Now, when we think of the UTA, we typically think of this as the UTA, right? The buses, the trains, not planes yet. But we're wrong. What the UTA really is it's also the opportunity for a community to be established and built around train stations. And it's really that opportunity to build apartments and other things near the track stations that has ultimately led to quite a bit of fraud. Okay? So what will happen is that usually the land that a train runs through might be worth anywhere from $4 to $5 a foot. After you put this bad boy in, that same dirt jumps to over $100 per foot. That is a substantial investment. And if you happen to know people where those trains are going to be going and where this amazing community is going to be built, you might make some money off of that. So that's where this investment opportunity attracts inside deals for fraud. And we've seen that, right? So years ago, Terry Deal was accused of fraud. Right? Here he is at a wonderful party with Randy Horiuchi. There he is again. It's wonderful. That was when he was leaving. Horiuchi, if you remember, what was his position in the state of Utah? County council. So as a county councilman, he had the ability to help and influence where trains were going. If you also remember, Mr. Deal here was on the board of directors for UTA. So a little bit about Terry Deal. He's a multimillionaire. In the 1990s, he actually sold the South Mountain Golf Course to Salt Lake County. Whew, big deal. 2001, he got put on the UTA board. 2008-9, Deal, Greg Hughes, and Greg Curtis, they started selecting this big site in Draper. Okay, and Draper quickly became one of their testing areas for the front runner, for tracks, and so many other hubs. And you'll notice he actually blew it up into this huge development, right? So Deal was the property owner just adjacent to where front runner was. And then in 2010, there was an audit for Deal for inside trading where he made over $20 million on the deal. Okay? In 2010, UTA agreed to pay $10 million to Deal's partner, Jeff Vitek, for a parking garage. Shocker, the garage is never built. Anybody feeling like your money is kind of getting wasted anymore? 2011, Deal resigns from the board. Hughes granted Deal a waiver, which then allowed him to get right back to doing business as usual with UTA. A year later, Deal filed a Chapter 11 bankruptcy, had $3.5 million in assets and $47.5 million in liabilities. So it was Draper Council was rewriting their city code with the Deal suggestions. Can anyone name a current legislature that was part of the Draper City Council? There he comes. Jeff Steinquist, who actually defended Deal and his dealings. Now, this inside opportunity does attract deals and fraud. Many of us in this room would call it illegal. Many whistleblowers called it illegal. A judge, however, acquitted Terry Deal of all charges. One news media reported how he got away with that was how? Because he has friends in all the right places. And his attorney had this to say: Terry Deal has been waiting for justice for over 2 years during the investigation and prosecution of the government's unfounded charges. He said in a statement he looks forward to reclaiming his good name and moving forward with the next chapter of his life. And when Randy Horiuchi was going through his divorce, he was actually living at Terry Deal's house, valued at close to $5 million, over 9,000 feet. What do I know? So the next question is, how in the world did UTA's debt become Utah's debt? How in the world did we get stuck with that thing? Well, glad you're here. Let's jump into it. So 2002, the debt that UTA had amassed was a measly $321 million. Most of us probably have that in your back pocket. Well, in 2008, times had changed. It jumped to, they had to issue a $700 million bond. And by 2010, the debt had grown up to a more respectable debt, $1.8 billion. Then they found out, wait a second, our tax revenues are about $67 million lower than the $1.2 billion we expected, which meant simply that the debt service was going to outpace the sales tax revenues. Why does that matter? Well, because the projected need jumped to $4 billion just to service the debt. 2013. Now, we're so in debt, what was the best thing for UTA to do? That's right, let's build another train. So in 2015, we took on the Frontlines project for $2.3 billion. Sounds like a good idea. It was subsidized by 24% from federal funds, which meant we, the people of Utah, only had to come up with $1.7 billion. That was a lot of money. So they put it to a vote. Proposition 1, if some of us remember it, back in 2015, came out and it was voted down. So there was no increase of funding, which meant what? UTA, high and dry. Got to figure out something new. So if you think hard, we've got a debt. The debt serviced by the communities taxing. The taxing for UTA at that time was limited to the communities that it served, primarily Salt Lake County, Davis County, a little bit of Utah County, a little bit of Tooele County. And gosh darn it, wasn't enough money. What do? Let's legislate, shall we? Senate Bill 136 created this interesting thing never heard of in the state of Utah, praised by most, that it was going to revolutionize mass transit in Utah. And it did it through creating this interesting term, which is a large public transit district. But it had to service 65% of the state, get that last word, population. And UTA serviced how much of the population of the state of Utah? 80%. Theoretically could jump on the train. So then what happened? Sales tax from the entire state of Utah is now able to service the debt. We finally have the money. Good, pat yourself on the back. That's your money. Good. Nobody should pat their back. Interesting quote. You never fight a government subsidy with a government subsidy. Okay? So it's the government that is creating the problem with the mismanagement of our money. And what are they doing? They're mismanaging our money to create more problems by mismanaging our money to create new problems. Ugh. Talk about a circle. Well, it didn't get over. We then had Greg Hughes, which at the time was the chairman of UTA, who was accused of the misuse of UTA funds. Here's his friend Kevin Garn, resigned after hot tub allegations with a 15-year-old in 2010, paid her $150,000 in 2003 when he was running for Congress. Anyway, so in this event, we have an individual who was on the board who didn't disclose his relationship with Greg Hughes, who was profiting from land deals similar to the land deals of Terry Deal. Again, Greg Hughes, as it says here, was marred by allegations of fiscal mismanagement, bonuses, right? Specifically to Terry Deal and others. So what did we do? We kicked out the old chairman of the board. We brought in a new chairman of the board. Needs somebody respectable. So what did we do? We found the ex-LDS presiding bishop to come in as the new board member. Well, let's look for a moment at Greg Hughes. This is a riot. Most of you know about this, the disclosures.utah.gov. If you don't, it is a rabbit hole. You can go there for hours and hours just like I do. It is fun. Well, you'll come in here and you want to click and understand exactly where the money is coming to support our legislators. I know you all got your phone out. Put them away for a moment because I'm going to do it for you. So I crunched the numbers. Here are Greg Hughes' donations when he ran for governor of the state of Utah. He collected $1.493 million, and 88% of it came from himself, his friend Kevin Garn, and his friend Mike Schultz. We the people. Well, there's got to be some good news. Let's look at the Center for Public Integrity. That sounds like a great place to start. They probably have great things to say about Utah, don't they? We can all just feel better and go back to sleep? Sorry. What do they say? One consistent problem across several categories is that Utah does not require detailed financial disclosures for the state's top elected officials, legislators, judges, career service employees, and their family members. That's a direct quote. Well, there's got to be some good reporting out there, which there is. So we want to next turn to this interesting thing called the CAFR. Comprehensive Annual Financial Reports. Me and my friends, we just call it the old CAF when we're getting together to study it, and all of you should do the same because it is a riot. How do you get there? Let me help you. So you're going to surf the web, surf on over to the legislative website. You're going to click on budget. It's going to pop up this little fly up. It's going to say COBI, C-O-B-I. You're going to click on COBI. COBI is going to try to confuse you. Don't become confused. There are options under COBI. Go to the financials. Under financials, you're going to click down at the bottom. Don't get worried about the fancy graphs where it says in very small print, almost like they didn't want you to find it, but it's there, Kobe. You click on Kobe, you come to this page. Anybody feeling confused yet? Maybe they did this on purpose. But if you come here, you have the financial highlights. That's what pops up initially. So you click on that button, search the year of your choice, and here it is, a 2-page report. And in that 2-page report, we have that the debt is $2.7 billion. And you can't forget about our AAA bond rating. There's that bad boy as well. Is that all we get, 2 pages? No, there's better. So you go back. You ignore that one and you go to the ACFR. So under this report, same thing, click on the year, and you're going to get a 254-page report. Whew. Fun. Still doesn't have even 2% of the details that you want, but it's 254 pages. In that report, you can see where our long-term debt is at. In that report, you'll be able to see the accounting expressed in millions. Right there, $4.432 billion. Okay? If that report just wets your whistle and you're still excited for more, which I can tell you are, there is more. You can go to the Treasurer's website. And under that, you can get some information on our bond accounting. This bad boy is only 243 pages. You could read it in an afternoon, I bet. In that report, you're going to be able to find a breakdown of our GO bonds, those general obligation bonds, and all we're doing is funding highways, prisons, refunding highways, prisons, highways, highways, prisons, prisons, highways. No. Okay, again, it's an accounting game, how we get to these numbers. All right, let's jump into where are we at today. 2025, next week, the governor already released that, $25.6 billion on the line. We know, pardon me, let's go back here. You see the purple? Purple says 34%. Notice down below, what does the purple represent? Federal funds. Did you know that? Did you know that our state is propped up by federal funds to the tune of 34%? So you take the hook, you're going to get rowed into the boat, which means this is one of the biggest reasons why when you ask yourself, why is it that Utah can't do things different with so-and-so and so-and-so? Why is it? The answer is quite simple. The hook is in our mouth, which is in our stomach, and we are in the boat with a bat on the back of the head. We are a landed fish. So 9.8 billion coming in. That, of course, has to go to service. If you only look at these, right? Higher education, it's going to do a little bit of law enforcement, 3%, and other things. And this is where, quite frankly, most people stop. But I can tell by looking at all of you, you are not most people. You're like me. And we want to go deep, really deep. So let's do it. So from here, we can then click on this interesting breakdown of the budget, which allows us to then look at each of the areas. These are historical areas. We can then click on each one of the subcategories or these appropriation committees to identify where is this money going? Where did it go last year? Where is it going this year? And yes, the math is true, 25% increase in 1 year. Which makes sense because most of us are probably spending 25% more on ourselves this year, right? We all went into our basement, we printed some new money. You were making 50 grand last year. You felt like you deserved it, so you just, extra 10, 15, call it, round up. Well, unfortunately, this evening we really can only scratch the surface. But what I'm really hoping, and I say it with a little bit of humor, because we can either start throwing things at the screen and breaking things, or we can look at this and say, thank you, Nate, for showing me how I can go look at this.
Thank you.
Right? The second thing would then be not only say that, but mean it and go do the research on your own. Okay? Go look into this further on your own. So let's understand further what these governments are funding, or these committees. So why don't we start with the executive offices and criminal justice? So that's all of them. I'm only going to be looking at public safety, which public safety, by the way, is going to increase $108 million. If you click on the blue button where it says public safety, it will take you on a ghost hunt. But if you go to some of the Treasury reports that I was showing you, you can then finally understand that this is where the money is actually going, that is called public safety. It's going to things like the Admin Service Division, Programs of Operation, Emergency Maintenance, Emergency Management, Emergency Disaster Management, Peace Officer Standards Training, Driver's License Division, Highway Safety. Now, we have come way off basis because, again, how did we start tonight's presentation? With principles. Is this the proper role of government? Before you try to understand and fix a government problem with more government problems, is this even the proper role of government? Let's look at the next appropriation subcommittee called Infrastructure and General Government. Those guys got to be up to good things, right? Let's just look at a couple items there. You see we have Department of Government Operations and Transportation. Under that we have Finance Mandated. Now I know it's hard to see on the board here, but this one is actually going to be increasing 6 times bigger than it's ever been before. Finance mandated. When in the world is finance mandated? Well, let's look at it. So if we go under finance mandated, oh, there it is. Emergency disease response, COVID. That went from $147 million in 2020 to $841 million in 2021. 6 times. Business, economic developments, and labor. Again, they fund all of those. Don't forget there's all of those. We can only scratch the surface tonight. So if we look at economic opportunity, and under that we look at this, again, bizarre phrase called a pass-through. Pass-through, $34 million. And in 2022, we've appropriated $115 million. That one got my attention. So if we go in and look at it, you'll notice up at the top, you don't get anything about this one. It just says, funding for this program reflects items that typically are deployed to non-state government entities. Non-state government entities. And it's 4 times bigger. So I started looking at that one. What is a non-state government entity? Glad you asked. So how does a non-state government entity get money? Simple. Think about Lumio. Everyone know Lumio? You don't know Lumio? Solar company? Come on, guys. Where you been? So Lumio is going to expand in Utah. So we're going to do a capital investment with Lumio of $120 million. They're going to bring 3,697 high-paying jobs that's going to generate, on average, $4,020,979,464 a year, which is going to help us to generate what? $161 million in taxes. We got to say thank you to Lumio. How are we going to do that? We're going to give Lumio 25% of the taxes back. $40,308,233 going once, going twice, and sold. That's what that meant. Rubber meets the road. That's what that little exercise in CAFR, Kobe, Treasury, that's what it meant. And if you're not mad yet, let's keep going. Social services. Again, proper role of government. We got health. We got workforce. Why don't we choose operations policy? As you can see here, it's going to be going from 354 million to almost $1 billion. Still not enough, though. Think of the kids. Think of the kids. 3 times bigger. Higher education. Did you all know that we fund $2.2 billion annually for the University of Utah, Utah State, Weber State, Southern Utah, Utah Valley, Snow College, Utah Tech, Salt Lake Community, Utah Board of Holly. Not just your tuition that your kids, you as parents pay. We subsidize it. $2.2 billion annually. Well, and they need more. How about 158 million more? Why not? Public education. Now, from the looks of it, I can tell we're walking on sacred ground here with most of you, so I'm going to try to be kind. Public education. Well, that's going to grow up just a little bit. Your baby got bigger. Was $5.9 billion last year. This year it needs to be $6.7 billion, an increase of $339 million. Did the math for you. But my gosh, what is a basic school program that's going to be increasing $108 million? I looked, couldn't find it. My hope is maybe one of you could look into this further and understand that. The Executive Appropriations Committee, again, why are we looking at this as well? Because this is what the governor proposed. This isn't my idea. These are screenshots. I know they're boring as all get out. They bore me too. But if we want to understand the problem that's in front of us, unfortunately, the first way of overcoming sin is you have to what? Recognize it. $23 million increase. So again, the quote we saw at the start, more true than ever before. There are people who think that plunder loses all its immorality as soon as it becomes legal. So again, the first thing we need to understand is, now we know how this appropriation works, right? The governor and all of his friends and their friends and more friends and their cousins' friends of friends, like it's a mess, right? So they finally get this money out there. Well, what do we do about it? Well, one senator, as I was in the room and he was proposing some new appropriations, Senator Enrich had this to say. When he was asked, why do you need that much money? He says, always ask for the max, because we can always reduce, but can't go higher. And then they had just this joyful exchange of, well, you're here for 30 million, but could you take 5? Oh, I can't take 5. What about 15? Oh, that's too much. Literally laughing and having just a joyous time as they're talking about the hard-earned money that we, the people, are strapped with. We'll spin him. I had to. Let's pause. Should we look at Jake Enrich as well? Why not? It's all financial disclosures, public record. So you know that he works for Zions Bank. He also works for a few other places. His LinkedIn page says that he is the VP of Community Development, and he's also an insurance consultant. But if we look further on his line items, you can see that these investment holdings are currently paying him nothing. But what does it say there, ladies and gentlemen? Anticipated future real estate holdings. Future investment fund. What in the world could this amazing senator from Lehigh, Lehigh, where we are tonight, what could this amazing person be doing? Nothing nefarious. Move on. Well, we know that he's a great person because just a few years ago he ran Senate Bill 84. Everybody remember Senate Bill 84? I was so excited for Senate Bill 84. Love Senate Bill 84. Libertas interviewed him. Senate Bill 84, sorry it's so small at the bottom, but it says, prohibits any vote on legislation that has been publicly available for less than 48 hours. How would that have helped? Well, most legislation, as we know, passes in the last couple days of the legislative session. Had this bill passed, it would have prevented roughly 70% of the bills getting through. I loved this bill. This was a great bill. And here's what happened to the bill. It went nowhere. And by nowhere, I mean it didn't even come out of rules. Now, somebody like Jacob Anderegg knows how to get a bill presented. He runs 30, 35 bills a year. Why? Well, because it's a commonly held tactic to portray someone as very liberty-oriented. They get all the praise for running it, but then it never sees the light of day. Don't fall victim. That year, I was a victim. Still a little bit of PTSD, to be honest with you, but I'm overcoming it. I've got Federal Reserve notes I wipe my eyes with and then I burn them because there's so many of them. Again, all is not well in Utah. Do you remember just a few years ago when we had Governor Herbert running, and what did he say? He said he would go anywhere for a check. He said, I'll just say I'm available. I'm available, Jones. Just happened to also say this at a breakfast at a particular building in Salt Lake called the Alta Club. For more information on that, stay tuned. Then we had another interesting issue where John Swallow was actually charged with fraud, later acquitted, and then we the people got to do what? We got to pay him $1.5 million for his legal defense. And we got Sean Reyes. I don't know if either one of these options is a great. Well, Defending Utah, folks, has been reporting on this for years. Clear back in 2014, they identified that the Orem City was trying to get their $63 million back. A young, up-and-coming writer by the name of Enoch Moore. Look for him after. He found that out of the $63 million that they were trying to use, they were trying to take $44 million from the Alpine School District to fund a mall. You cannot make this up. This is real. Further, Defending Utah found out and commented a lot on this constitutional convention where legislators would pay $100 to get together and play make-believe and have a constitutional convention of their own. And if you're not familiar with a constitutional convention, Defending Utah's reported on that as well via their podcast episode, Article 5 Convention. They've done 289 episodes to try to help, to try to educate, with presentations like this tonight. So again, appropriations. We went over that a little bit quick. So let's go back and visit. What is the process? So an appropriation is basically and literally an amount of money that is used or provided by a government for a specific purpose. Meaning, you might come in and say something like, well, I need $100 million for this. And they appropriate or give you the ability to have available, in the event that you really do need it, $100 million. Okay? Then you have to give an accounting of that $100 million, and did you spend it all? Okay? So that money that is given out is typically based on how much money was given out last time or historically. Okay, the other is you were appropriated $100 million. Did you actually spend $100 million? And this, ladies and gentlemen, is got to stop. If there's one thing that we could probably fix sooner than later, it's this item right here. Because what happens is it leads people to say, oh my gosh, I got $100 million and I really only needed 62. I can't go back and tell them I only needed 62 because I need 120 22 next year. So what will happen? They will quickly find a way to spend all the money that they have. So why? They're justified in asking for more. Trust me, I've sat in appropriation meetings for hours and hours and hours and hours. Hours. And that's what happens every time. So again, new funding is then largely determined by a legislator carrying the request forward. And then it gets approved. So again, what are the areas? There they are. Gotta love them. The 8 areas that we need some help with. This is how it's broken down like we saw before. You've got 4 million, 6 billion, 7 billion, and on. So I mentioned this earlier, that there's this power and prerogative that's granted to the chair of this committee. Again, all legislators are on at least one appropriations committee. But then there are chairs. And what these chairs get is this interesting thing during the first 3 weeks where the chair passes out colored sheets of paper. Yeah, they're colored. And sometimes they're purple, which is fun for me, because why not? But they pass out this recommendation on what should pass and what should not pass. It's called the chair's prerogative. Okay? So the budget then moves through in a process that looks like that one. So that's a 9-sheet. Sorry, I didn't want to bore you by showing you each of the sheets, so that's how I chose to do it. We can talk after if you have a problem with my PowerPoint presentation. It's fine. But it looks like that. And they'll highlight certain areas of it and say, you know, these ones look great. Let's not talk about those. But these other ones, we can talk about. Then after that, you come out with a 32-page report 5 days later. And that report resulted in $6.6 billion. That's how it works. Now, in between, of course, every one of those little tiny cells represents someone going up and begging for another 100 million, 20 million, 6.3 billion, whatever the number may be. So let's pause for a moment. Let's go through each one of these, because we've looked at the numbers, but behind the numbers are people. People like Mike McKell of the Senate, who is the co-chair with Christine Watkins. What do we know about Mike McKell? Well, since it's listed this way, I'm going to assume nobody's ever seen this before. So the first thing you want to look at on here, again, senators on this side, House representatives over here. Yes, the senators just redid their website. It looks really fancy. And I believe that the House representative people are quite upset because theirs is not formatted very nice. But over here you see the district that they serve, the counties. You can see the same thing. So we've got Utah County. Over here we have, she's from Price. We then can see when did they start their service. Senator McKell started in 2013. Christine Watkins, don't let that one fool you. It wasn't actually 2017. Does anyone know when she first started up there? Well, let me tell you then. Sometimes I think that these are interactive. I've been told that they're not, so forgive me. But anyway, so she actually started in the early 2000s, and then something interesting happened in 2012. She lost. Because why? She was running as a Democrat. Well, she knew she had a lot of good to do, so what did she do? She's now a Republican who has been serving since 2017. Give her a hand. Well, Mike McKell, on the other side, little known fact about Mike McKell while we're on that. He has an interesting brother-in-law. Anyone know who the brother-in-law of Mike McKell is? Spencer Cox is his brother-in-law. Okay. So you start to see through these type of interactions, how is it that this young man, Mike McKell, is managing $563 million with Christine Watkins? Now I have to pause because we've all seen this meme. It's too good, so let's look at it. Congress should wear jackets like NASCAR drivers so we can know who bought them. Now, I wanted to take this literal. So, let's go back to that slide, shall we? Would you like to know Senator Mike McKell's 2020 donations? Yeah. Great. Because I went and pulled them for you. Here they are in all their glory. Don't worry about totaling them. I will. $56,302. Now, if you notice here, we have things like Christensen Law Firm, Regents, Siegfried and Jensen, Republic Services, Maverick, Parson Bell, Cigna. You know what I don't see on here? Citizens. Where are the citizens? Who does he work for? $56,000. This is going to be a fun one. One drink of water. So here we have the Executive Appropriations Committee. Same thing, you can look it over. As far as the districts, same outline as before. All right, here we go. That might not look like much. $133,164,000. Now, what do we know about Jerry Stevenson? Well, Jerry Stevenson, he was the mayor of Layton for 12 years, thank goodness. Bless his heart. He also worked as a Weber State University trustee, Wasatch Integrity Integrated Chair, doing military installations, and he was the UTA Rail Committee Chair. We've talked about UTA, nothing but good things over there. He owns J&J Produce, which is a nursery production and sales, and he also does seed fertilizer and other related items. Bradley Last is the interesting fellow. So Bradley Last is actually employed down at Dixie State University. Now don't hate me for calling it Dixie State University. I'm simply referencing what is on his bio. If it needs to be changed, I'll reference it as it's supposed to be. Right now it's Dixie. Okay? Just read what's on the screen. So he's the Vice President of Institutional Advancement and Development for Dixie State. Do you know what that means? So what it means is that he's the hired gun for the university that gets their big projects funded by raising lots of money from wealthy people and from the university. But at the same time, he's also on the Executive Appropriations Committee, which is literally the last word on how money is spent in our state. Okay? So he's a very powerful man controlling that $25 billion budget. Now, he was hired by Dixie State to get money, and his job depends on bringing money into the university. Anyone know what they pay him? That's right, $142,111 a year, plus $26,146 in bonuses, plus $30,363 in compensation as an elected official. Do the math on that, it's more than $200,000 a year on the backs of we the people. This is all government jobs. Okay? So, why did I have a problem with this? Well, the interesting thing is that he was actually working on getting some funding for Dixie State College so that they could build a building that cost $50 million. And before that building was even built, he was getting more funding to build more buildings. So much so that the university president even said, "We have more money than we need." Which I think Brad should really talk to that president, make sure that he never says something like that again. Very disheartening. Okay? So, again, just a sliver of who these people are. Should we look at Representative Last's campaign's donations? I'm glad you asked. There they are. Now, I made these to specifically, hopefully overwhelm you, hopefully maybe make you have problems, because again, Utah Medical, Imagine Learning, CenturyLink, Utah Bankers, Utah Athletic Trainers, Dish, love that one. Pfizer, right? Yeah. Moving along. So we have the executive offices in criminal justice appropriation. We have Daryl Owens and Cheryl Acton. What do we know about Daryl? Well, he's a school counselor, and he works closely with students at Wob High School down in Sanpete County, and now he's mostly a senator. I don't know much more about Darren, I'm sorry. Cheryl Acton, on the other hand, has worked as a law librarian while her husband finished law school or graduate school. He also worked for the U.S. Census Bureau, the Department of Defense, where she earned the Merit Service Award. She is a freelance writer and editor. She's an internet researcher, but most of all, she loves to be a teacher. And the interesting thing is, she won her seat by a coin toss. We'll look at that in a moment. Now, Cheryl Acton had an interesting one. The reason why I highlight her is 27,549. Not a lot compared to the others, but 22,000 came from her colleague parties. So in red, those are other colleagues. In blue, those are the political activity committees or PACs. And then you've got the black, which is businesses. And then you have nobody else. So yes, she did win the election by coin toss. If you'd like to know more about that, Utah's Secret Combinations, the presentation that Defending Utah gave last year, is a must-see. Timestamp 1 hour, 33 minutes is where this particular item is discussed. So tune into that one. The Higher Education Appropriations Subcommittee. This one we have Keith Grover and Kelly Miles. So I'm just going to say this. With all due respect to Senator Grover, he has the worst website ever created by man. If you go to his website, it's so bad. Somebody contact him and just offer to build it for him. It's very bad. Now, you can't feel too bad, though, for Senator Grover. He is a medical professional. He's an OBGYN, has a practice down in Utah County. But he's currently employed up at the University of Utah and has a number of investment properties in Hawaii. So he's doing quite well. Kelly Miles is a attorney, as you can see on his personal career information. $2.2 billion is being managed by their committee, subcommittee. And if we look at Representative Miles' campaign contributions, $95,287. So when they ask people like you or me or others, why don't you run for political office? Well, just run out and raise $100,000. You starting to figure out that this group may not allow you? So here we have the Infrastructure General Government, Chris Wilson. What do we know about this gentleman? He owns Wilson Cars up in Logan. Beautiful cars, 5-star rating. Recommend if you do need a Lincoln, please go to Wilson Motors. It's not sponsored by Wilson Motors. I'm not getting paid tonight. Okay, now, interesting story though about Chris Wilson. He beat out the longest tenured senator in the state, Lyle Hilliard. Okay, now most of us remember Lyle Hilliard. He was the senator that was behind the tax bill of 2020. So he got together, he told his friend Wilson, I'm not going to be running again. Then he changed his mind. Wilson, I will be running. Wilson had already started doing some fundraising, so off he went. Okay? And he ended up beating Hilliard. Sagers was a health executive from 2000 to 2014. He was also the Tooele City Mayor for 2 terms. and he was an investment and mortgage banking executive for 18 years. Now he's retired, full-time representative. These two are managing $4 billion for us. Now, Senator Wilson came out of the gates hot and heavy. Here we go. Bam. 133,000 in 1 year. Now, he did donate 29,000 to himself, as you can see in the top corner. Now, why would a person do that? Why would you spend $29,000 to go get a $20,000 job? Don't think too hard on that one. Dave Hinkins and Student Bar, these are the natural resource agriculture environment. Now,
you could back up one slide.
maybe.
This picture in the middle. Yeah, get rid of him.
Someone really appreciates my work,
Oh, yeah.
which is nice, right? But none of you are really asleep yet. I see some hunched over. I did get permission to throw things, so look out for it. All right. I find these two fascinating, absolutely fascinating. Why? Well, Barlow is not just a physician and a surgeon. He also is an owner in 17 other businesses, including apartments, a real estate building, hotels, mobile homes, an assisted living center. He's a cattle rancher. He has his medical practice. He provides air conditioning rentals to HUD low-income apartments. He has a manufactured home park. He has many real estate and investment holdings. Dr. Barlow. Then we have Dave Hinkins. Can you scroll my notes for me? No. Many as well. Too many notes, I'm sorry. But between the two of them, they are managing $798 million. If we look at Representative Barlow's campaign donations, again, same thing. We'll see only raised $29,000 that year, but don't worry. $44,000 of it was a balance transfer, which meant the year before he had $44,000 that he just didn't need to get all of you to feel comfortable voting because his mailers and website and robocalls and text messages and cookies from Costco and all those wonderful things. He had a little left over. But if you want to run against him, just remember, he's got 75 grand in the bank ready to spend. Making sense here? Lincoln Fillmore and Steve Ellison. So Fillmore, does everybody love those nothing but cakes? Nothing but cakes? That's his. He owns that. He's also a 50% partner in Plexus Partners. So Steve Ellison, he works up at the University of Utah Hospital and Clinics, which was a big step up for him. Previously, he was the general manager at Fans. Love that. The two of them are managing $6.7 billion. $6.7 billion. Senator Fillmore, who did have a tough fight. He was in a tough fight to get reelected. And, you know, the best way to get elected isn't to have just campaign platitudes. You got to have the Costco cookies. You got to have mailers. You got to have a website. You got to have polling. You got to have texting. You can't do it without it. And so he did raise a little bit of money. They wouldn't all fit. $91,000. $91,000. Now again, there are on this one, believe it or not, there's about 5 or 6. Each one of these columns is 25 different donations, which means if you look at that, he received in excess of 110 different donations of at least $100 or more. Senator Fillmore, welcome back. We will be visiting you. So we have Jacob Anderegg, Raymond Ward. We've looked at Jacob Anderegg. There just isn't enough time to look at him again, but we always could, but tonight we won't. So Raymond Ward is a family physician. He loves to help people with narcotic addictions, bless his heart. And if any of you are looking for a pickup game of pickleball, he is a huge pickleball fanatic, and he would love to play you. Just call him. It's on his website. I'm actually just reading his website right now. $9.5 billion being managed, folks. So Jacob Andrade, same thing. Only $29,000 last year. Don't feel bad. He did have $38,951 that he transferred over. Same thing. You want to run against Jake Andrade, you better bring at least $70,000 to the table. So, you've all been great. So if we take just a moment to pause, one quote that I love is that we are fast approaching the stage where the government is free to do anything it pleases, while the citizens may act only by permission. Feel that way? Paper is not money. It is a substitute for money, and it's fraud. Love the Ron Paul. The welfare of the people has always been the alibi of tyrants. Again, think back, right? Why did we initially get the Continentals in the 1780s? Why? Because the only way that we could overcome the war was through what? It was through the printing of money. How is it that we can overcome the effects of COVID-19? The only way that we can do that is what? Print more money. Just a heck of a lot more today. I'm sorry, but we're still not done. Because like I said, there's a lot of people involved. Do you know that there are people out there called lobbyists and special interests or stakeholders? So what is the role of a lobbyist? So on paper, this is what a lobbyist should do. A lobbyist is hired and paid. Remember that. They are not just there out of the free will. Okay? You could ask our host tonight, Defending Utah. They have not compensated me anything, which is about the value of tonight's presentation. But lobbyists are different. They're professionals, so they're hired and paid for. And what are they supposed to do? I've highlighted. They're supposed to exert influence over elected officials at all levels of government. Well, here in the state of Utah, they actually get to wear this special little white badge. Okay? And again, lobbyists, think back to the offer made by the Governor Herbert to be available Jones. Cut me a check. Bring the checks. Come talk to me. What was that money buying? Was it just a conversation? That's what business people do. They spend money to have conversations, right? So we all know he was clearly saying, give me money and I will listen to your needs and I will make sure your needs are met. Representative Hall. It was in 2014 he ran Senate Bill 246. Why did he run Senate Bill 246? Well, he remembers back when he was just a regular representative. He'd be walking the halls, people would come up to him. And he couldn't figure out if that was a regular citizen or a lobbyist. I want to make sure I talk to the special people. Now, there are great lobbyists out there, such as Frank Piganelli. Now, he decided that wearing the badges was very irritating and unnecessary. He went on to say that I just think it's silly and it's not necessary. And it smacks of the nanny state. Our forefathers didn't cross the plains so that we can stick badges on lobbyists. Thanks, Frank. There's another fun picture of Frank. Here he is. He's at the Alta Club social media page with some other fun people. Want to learn more about it? There's another presentation, same one I've been really promoting all night, Utah's Secret Combinations. 22,817 views. That was when I reported this. It's probably over 100,000 by now. Don't fact check me. Yes, it's a must watch. So the role of the lobbyist. So while I was up at the state capitol, I had a very interesting experience, which was to look around the room and to notice that I was the weirdo. That I was there taking notes, and I saw these people wearing a white badge, and I kept thinking, that looks cool. Can I have one? Why do you have one? There's a lot of you. Why don't I have a badge? Then I figured it out, because they're lobbyist badges, okay? So I was in there, and Representative Daw was supporting appropriation for a family residential treatment program. Sounded great. I'm listening to this thing. It was on yellow paper that day. I still have the paper. No, it's not signed, but it is legit. I was there. And I looked into that and I thought, the legislature is going to appropriate $1 million on, this is what it looks like when you guys go up there next week. Get ready, it's the Super Bowl. Cancel your appointments. $1 million ongoing for family treatment programs. And I thought to myself, oh, $1 million for families? And then you hear the families talking and I find myself thinking, I don't know if $1 million is enough. I think we should give them like 50 million. I think we should give them 25 billion. I'll give them everything I have. This sounds great. And I had to keep thinking back to a very important principle, which is the principle that we saw at the start of this presentation. What is the proper role of government? Now, if that was all that happened, I would have had no problem with it. But it wasn't. Okay? Because I was there in the room. And while I was there in the room and I'm watching this happen, I see a lobbyist stand up, and this guy is agitated. He is moving around, shaking around. Then Representative Daw got it passed, and this is what the lobbyist starts doing, fist pumping. I'll call you, right? Doing these things. Why do I stress this? Well, for me, it demonstrates the importance of physical attendance at these type of meetings. Right? Was it fun for me to be there? No. I would much rather be outside shooting guns, playing golf, going on walks with my kids, putting my hands in blenders, like, normal things that would be better than this. But I was there. And you see things and you get educated in a way that you wouldn't otherwise. One more example. Now, take a shot of that. I made you a clip. It's 28 minutes. I know not everybody has the time to go up to the state legislature, but grab this clip. I made it especially for you, with love. One of the best exchanges I've ever seen. So, if any of you are planning on watching the full 28 minutes and you're going to have popcorn and you want to be surprised, please stop. Stop this right now. Leave the room. Pause the video. Watch that first, because spoilers are coming. All right, you had your chance. So at this moment, we have Brady Brammer. Yeah, he's got twins at home. Great dad. Versus Kelly Miles. So Brady Brammer stands up the last day of the legislative session. Okay? It is 9:30 at night. They got 2.5 hours to go. And there's Brady Brammer, and he's presenting Senate Bill 228. Senate Bill 228, the inherent risks of skiing amendments. Can you tell I love this stuff? Oh, it's fascinating. Well, right in the bill, ladies and gentlemen, lines 105 to 114. Not even one of these big bills. This is a tiny little bill. But it talks about limitations on damages. Okay? And it specifically says non-economic losses may not exceed $1 million. A non-economic loss is, of course, pain and suffering. What does this really mean? Well, it means if you're up skiing and you get hurt while skiing in Utah, that you can no longer sue to get damages, non-economic damages, pain and suffering damages, in the excess of $1 million. And I'm listening to this and I'm thinking, no, day in court, no, can't do it. And all of a sudden, we figure out from Brady Brammer that the trial attorneys and the ski resorts, those are the important people. Not you and I, not the fiscal analysts, nobody else. Attorneys and the ski resorts got together and they decided that this is a good agreement. Well, Kelly Miles stands up, and it's awesome. And he says, I don't like this. This bill never went through committee. That's a problem I have with bills that are presented this late in the session. It has to go through committee. Well, I'm starting to wake up. I'm dusting this. I'm like, it's happening. It's really happening. One person can make a difference. It's happening. And he says, nobody ever spoke to me about this. I only found out about this 45 minutes ago. And then Miles introduced a floor amendment, which is where a representative says, you've told me what's in your bill, and I like it, except I need this amendment or something changed, added or taken away. In this instance, he needed something taken away. And what was it that he needed taken away? Lines 105 to 114. He said, yeah, those can't be in there. Those attorneys don't represent me. Those attorneys don't represent my kids. Well, of course, and as can be expected, when Miles introduced his amendment, Brammer did say, this is not a friendly amendment. Now, on the Hill, those are fighting words. That is as strong as you can get. That is rough. Whew. Tensions were high. Ball was on the goal line. What's going to happen? Okay? Well, what happened is that it seemed like Miles actually got the rest of his colleagues woken up. And at that moment, what started to happen was really interesting, because you had other representatives standing up and saying, yeah, I mean, I don't like this either. This doesn't make sense for me either. And then his amendment went to a vote, a voice vote, and the yeas had it. The amendment passed. Very quickly, Brady Brammer challenged it. Recount. 10 or more stand, and they were going to do a recount. And 10 stood. Oh, it's unbelievable. Never seen it. Amazing. 28 minutes. Got to watch it. So they all stand up. They do a vote, and guess what? The amendment passed. Those lines destroyed. I started texting Ben. I started texting my wife. And I'm telling them, one person can make a difference. It really happened. I'm here. It really happened. Everything you've said, maybe it's wrong. It happened. Had to tell people. Well, then the plot thickens. In come the lobbyists. Because I forgot to mention that that night, 9 o'clock at night, on the balcony in the house, was me and a few other people that I'd gather around me, because I'm up there, I'm handing out, my printouts, I've got my playbook, I try to make it fun, right? So let's go. But then there's about 50 other people up there. And I know them this time, because guess who they are? White badges. And when this thing died, they were not happy. So they all went downstairs, and suddenly on the House floor, none of the representatives were at their desk anymore. They were all out in the hallway getting a talking to, because they were in trouble. Well, thank goodness. You understand that? Nobody tells me what to say, and on the pencil it says lobbyist. It's funny. Okay? So the bill had to go back to the Senate, because it came from the Senate in one way, and the House changed it. It had to go to the Senate, and the Senate had to say, cool, we're good with your changes, we concur. The Senate would not concur. So 30 minutes passed, grueling minutes. That's a lifetime. Plenty of time to change your mind, right? Well, it comes back, and suddenly, miraculously, all is right in the House of Representatives. It passes as originally constituted after a 28-minute debate. It was like they got amnesia. They just forgot about it. It just never happened. And they came back, and it passed, 57 to 18. Watch the video. One of the best displays, has all of the nuances that you'd like to see in an exchange between a bill. Well, who are the stakeholders? Well, a stakeholder is any individual or group, and that's the important one that makes a difference or that can affect or be affected by the achievement of the organization's objectives. So those would be things like the private sector. And that's what it is primarily. We see a lot of businesses that are up there lobbying. There's business interest, right? The ski resorts have an interest. Bankers have interest. Massage therapists have interest. They all have interest, and they are stakeholders trying to get their information through. There are non-governmental organizations, such as the United Nations. There are civil societies, such as the Salt Lake City. And I was always surprised to see the number of elected mayors that are up there for almost the entire legislative session, until I understood, oh, they're just a stakeholder. They want to make sure that what they want gets passed through. Then there are what's called technocrats. The definition of a technocrat is an important model of governance where people commonly known as elite make expert decisions. Then we have the public sector who implement policy. We have faith-based, we have researchers, and many more. Where does that leave us? Well, from my position, with very limited access. Very limited access. And why? Well, how many of you in this room have donated hundreds of thousands of dollars to a legislator? How many of you have a professional lobbyist working for you? If you don't, and you feel that your phone call and your very well-written, shared on social media email is going to enact change, fight the good fight. But does it really? Does it really have any sway? So what are the solutions? Because I've had to paint kind of a bleak picture. When I was originally showing this display and this PowerPoint presentation to some friends of mine, they said, Nate, I gotta go throw up, man. I'm like, should I put my mask back on? Was I better? I said, no, this is just so bad. It's so bad. I always thought it was bad, but this is so bad. First of all, we need to remember, if it is immoral for the individual, then the government cannot do it. Not might do it, right? Might not pretend it. They cannot do it. The second, I would say, is the importance of physical attendance at these meetings. The nuances that occur when the camera is on, you never get what's really happening. Right? The opportunity to see a bill go down and to watch what happens. The interesting thing about that Brammer bill, to go back to it, he was going to run the bill, and then he circled the bill, meaning he put the bill on pause. Why? He's not up there anymore. I was acting like he was. The reason he did is because he knew that Representative Miles had problems with the bill. And I saw the two of them. They got up and they walked to the back of the room, and they're talking, 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 and they're talking. Then they went outside to talk some more. And then Representative Brammer came back in and he said, I have a bill to present, but I have a voice amendment. And he made the voice amendment. He admits he made the voice amendment because Miles asked him to make the voice amendment. And then Miles kind of, hit him in the back of the head a little bit by coming up with another amendment. Never would have seen any of that had I not physically been there. Okay? So I still feel that physical attendance is a huge deal. The other that I would say, divided we are weak, united we are strong. A united voice from the populace will outweigh that. Yes, I said many, many times, there are many, 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 many people. If I had to give you a number, just pull it out of the air between Governor Cox and all of his government and everybody else, I would probably give you a number somewhere between 3,000 to 5,000 people are the decision makers in a state that has a population in excess of 3 million. A voice united, we can win. Most often, legislators will feel a public threat to their ability to get reelected or their ability to be successful when they receive somewhere between 25 and 30 emails. Did you know that? When they have to sit and look out and see people staring at them, coming up, giving their name. My name is, I live at, and I'm here to offer testimony in opposition of this, or I'm here to offer testimony in favor of this. It matters. I feel it matters. So call to actions, they do work. Informing your neighbor, they do work. But you better have good information. In a world of misinformation, oftentimes one of the biggest threats to the liberty movement, in my humble opinion, is people go a little too quick, a little too far. They might come to conclusions that they feel are a certain way, but they cannot prove it. For example, this evening we talked about Terry Deal. I also showed you that that man was acquitted in a court of law. What is the truth? He was acquitted in a court of law. Did he do things that I very much disagree with? 100%. Does that mean that the court of law decision was accurate in my opinion? Nope. But I will share the facts with you. Another organization that does that is Defending Utah. Years ago in 2016, they identified a particular bill that was going to strip the authority of the highest law of the land, your county sheriff. They found it. And you know what happened? The bill was effectively gutted and changed and died. How? Because people started talking about it. Great information on the Defending Utah YouTube channel. Currently at over 11,000 subscribers. Like we mentioned, many great videos that you could find out more about this. But ultimately, I would highly encourage you to jump on to defendingutah.org. Find out more. Right? Hopefully tonight was just an opportunity for us, all of us, to scratch the surface, to understand there is a problem, but there are solutions. Maybe now you feel like instead of just saying, oh, that $25 billion budget is really big, now maybe you can look at certain things. You can say, man, I know that we're giving away $42 million just to help a solar company with its taxes. Right? Now you can know a little bit more about these players. You can know a little bit more about these individuals. But I appreciate your attention. You're very kind, and I would love for comments if this is posted up online down below, or further dialogue that all of you can now do to hopefully continue pushing forward the advancement of understanding what's going on with our money. Thank you.
Make sure you turn off your mic. Turn off your mic, because it gives an echo. Hey, thank you so much, Nate. That was powerful. I mean, wow. We got a little sneak peek, but this was powerful. I appreciate Nate giving this presentation tonight, giving us these things again. In about 2 weeks, his presentation will be on our YouTube channel that he mentioned there, and with all of the links that he talked about for you to be able to get easy access to. I encourage you to share that with your friends once that goes live. Also want to let you know about our booklets. We have 3 of our booklets up at that table right there. The booklets themselves are free. Ezra Taft Benson Society has books. This one's, remind me again, $10 for Stand Up for Freedom, Talks by Ezra Taft Benson. And then a $5 book. This is on secret combinations with even a chapter covering some of Utah. So Encourage you to get those. Also encourage you to stay afterwards, visit with each other. Afterwards, come up and ask Nate any of your questions one-on-one. And I encourage you to please be a part of the solution, to make sure that you want to just join with others, because we can be lone rangers and we just spin our wheels. But when we join together with people that understand the threats to liberty as well as the principles of liberty, we can have an impact. So please go to defendingutah.org and become a member today. Support our efforts and become part of the solution.